Hello, romance lovers. Today's story is called Sword and the Dress. If you enjoy our videos, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss out on more exciting stories. 300 years ago, the goddess Gaia loved people. She prepared a gift for the empire of Helenair, who followed her. The goddess carefully gathered love and light to create a holy soul and sent it to the purest couple in the empire. The saint was born. However, the aristocrats could not stand the fact that such an honor was given to ordinary commoners. So they mercilessly slaughtered their family and then locked the saint in a white castle, completely isolating her from people. When the girl turned 15, the aristocrats discovered that her blood had healing properties. To satisfy their desires, they began to collect it. Among the colors and loneliness, the blood slowly began to flow down the body. It was pouring rain. The angry townspeople chased the witch. The knight, carrying the girl in his arms, found a cave to hide in. The girl, barely breathing, said his name, Avillon. She asked him for forgiveness. She said that she wanted to live as an ordinary girl in her next life, not a saint. She stroked Avillon's face, where she would be someone's daughter, where she could become someone's wife, and then a mother. She asked him to forgive her for making her do all this. The life of a saint is too hard. So, she continued, if she becomes an ordinary girl in the next life, she will be sincerely grateful to him. And smiling at him, she closed her eyes and went limp. Avillon called her, but there was no answer. Sitting on the floor, holding her in his arms, he hugged the girl tightly, asking her to hold on a little longer. Begging her not to leave him, he burst into bitter tears. Gritting his teeth in pain, the man screamed, calling out to the goddess Gaia. He asked her what the saint had done wrong. Even after she was locked in the darkness and left alone, she continued to give her blood. Her entire body was covered in blood and pus. The saint never complained. Not once. He shouted that if she just wanted to steal everything from her, she shouldn't have given him anything at all. He begged her to let her live a normal life. Sobbing even harder, he screamed for Gaia to be damned. Yriel opened her wet eyes. She had that dream again. The maid was inviting her to breakfast. She couldn't eat anything. The brother complained to the father, and the father asked his daughter not to make a sour face, for which he received a kick from his wife. She suddenly said that lately she had been having a strange dream in which a knight with silver hair was crying. The girl thought about it and continued that if you think about it, wasn't she a saint in her past life? Silence. The father laughed sharply, tears streaming down his face. The son hinted that he should stop. The father apologized for going too far. That's right. What's wrong with Yriel? Even though her eyes aren't golden, she's as beautiful as a saint. After saying that, he laughed again. Saying that she was not even close to a saint, the brother asked his sister to put the fork back. Riding in a carriage with her brother, she was indignant at how her father could do this to his daughter's only dream, and on such a day. The brother thought her dream was strange, especially strange on Isanje Day. Isanje. In memory of Saint Mary, beloved by the goddess Gaia, an event is held where noble ladies gather at the Helepan Palace where she lived. The coachman announced that they were almost there. The girl looked out the window. The palace was visible in all its glory. They stopped. The brother gave his hand to his sister, who, admiring, looked only at the palace. The brother looked around, saying that it seemed that Estelle had not arrived yet. Yriel wanted to go alone, look around and wait inside. But he was very worried that she would get lost. There were many people there, and he couldn't go with her. His sister assured him that all the ladies there were noble. What could happen? Besides, she was already 20. She was an adult. While walking around the palace, she actually got lost, hoping to meet someone. The girl noticed the statue of Mary and the knight bowing before her. She was beautiful. Looking at them, she thought that the knight's face was very familiar to her, and tears began to flow down her face. There was a stabbing pain in her chest. She didn't understand what was happening. She had never felt anything like this before. Tears just flowed from her eyes. She didn't know who the man in the statue was, and she didn't understand why her heart was breaking. She found it hard to breathe, and she collapsed to the ground unconscious. A man came up to her and, taking her in his arms, said that everything was okay, so she didn't need to go back to those nightmares, because now he would take care of her. He touched her tear-stained face and said that he hoped she could live a normal life, as she wanted. The man asked Yriel to breathe, slowly, saying that everything was okay. She opened her eyes and saw a handsome, stately man with dark hair in front of her, and she said that he was handsome. Her unexpected action embarrassed her very much. He gave her his hand, inviting her to stand up. She apologized for the inconvenience, to which the man replied, "Nothing, except that he was glad that she liked his face." And he smiled. The girl blushed. They introduced themselves. The man's name was Ravnar. She could just call him Rev. She thought she had gone completely crazy because she really liked him. He explained that the palace was quite confusing and difficult to get to. The girl replied that she was lost. He offered to take her to the place where the celebration was taking place. She talked about her family and how it bothered her that they treated her like she was a little girl, even though she was already 20. And she asked how old Ravnar was. He thought about it, saying that he didn't know exactly, probably 27 years old. She smiled mysteriously and went into thought. Their age difference is 7 years. If she marries him, she will have a wedding earlier than expected. Rev asked what she was thinking. The girl hesitated and answered that she loves her beautiful family. An angry woman was approaching them quickly. Estelle Pointy. She grabbed Yriel's hand and pulled her towards her, screaming at the man to get away from her right now. Estelle looked at him. He seemed strange to her. His gaze looked dangerous. Yriel stopped her, explaining that he had helped her and asking her to remove the spirits that she had threatened Ravnar with. The girl apologized and introduced herself. She is the eldest daughter of the Duke of Balamez, Estelle. Balamez. And she tactlessly asked the man what family he was from. After introducing himself, he said that unfortunately he was a commoner, so he couldn't answer. Estelle was surprised that a commoner was in such a place, and with a sword. Yriel looked at the sword. It seemed familiar to her. He said goodbye and left. Yriel was very upset. They almost met. She didn't want him to leave. She was surprised where this almost, like the emotions of another person, came from. When she left the palace, the girl was in a kind of enchanted state. Her brother asked Estelle what was wrong with her, to which she, putting her hand to her head, replied that she didn't know, but she was leaving, so he would have to find out for himself. My sister suddenly said that she likes someone. His name is Rev, and he is the most handsome guy she has ever seen. His dark hair and purple eyes are so wonderful. Her brother tried to protest, but she only replied that it was terrible to be jealous. Turning around, she added that it was a secret, but he was a commoner. Then, beaming with happiness, she said that status was not the main thing, and ran off into the carriage cheerfully. Ed was alarmed. He clearly did not like this fact. At home, the brother met with his father, telling him what had happened and saying that it seemed he had appeared. Given Estelle's reaction, there was no doubt. Father said the time had come. They needed to prepare. They needed to stop the saint's awakening. They needed more blood. An unknown man in a cloak was watching Yriel's walk. She was choosing jewelry, and when she picked one up, the man accompanying her explained to her that it was a kakal, an ornament not for clothing, but for a sword. The merchant admired the girl, saying that she had a diamond eye and that her emerald shawl symbolized happiness. Peridot kakal symbolizes friendship, but emerald symbolizes someone's happiness. These are given to family members. Yriel cried out with delight about the purchase. She was wondering whether to take something for her father and brother. The man asked in surprise, who was it for? The girl dodged as if he didn't need to know. Someone tried to touch Yriel, and Klimp grabbed him. He asked what he was doing and if he had any business with the young lady. Turning around, the girl saw Ravnar. Klimp pointed his sword at the man, but he didn't move, looking at him with confidence. Yriel screamed to stop, but he ordered the young lady to stay behind, shielding her with his body. He thought he had been practicing swordsmanship for a long time, but this was the first time he saw such a monster. The girl got scared and kicked Klimpa so that he fell. She explained to him that Rev was her friend and his rudeness was unforgivable. She asked him to forgive her for the servant's behavior, and she wanted to make amends for her guilt. Saying this, the girl squeezed the kakal in her hands. After thinking about it, Rev asked her if she would do him a favor. She happily agreed. Taking out his sword, he placed it on Klimp's neck and asked if she would give him the life of this rude man. The girl was horrified. She hesitated, saying that Klimp was a knight who was dear to her family. Tears began to appear in her eyes. She was ready to give him anything, just begged him not to harm Klimp. Ravnar smiled, hiding his sword. He said it was a joke. In relief, the girl covered her face with her hat. He took her hand and asked for forgiveness. Having invited her on a date, they walked through the forest. Taking the girl by the hand, he said that they were almost there and asked her to walk more carefully. He noticed her limp. Ravnar picked her up, saying that it looked like she had hurt her leg when she hit that night. There wasn't much left, so he offered to carry her. She felt extremely awkward. Her cheeks turned pink and she lowered her hat. After a while, they arrived at the place. The sea, endless and beautiful, the sun was shining brightly. The girl was amazed by the beauty. Having seated her on the rocks by the water, Ravnar told her to dip her feet in the cold water to ease the pain. He asked her if she liked it. She replied that it was wonderful here. Yriel blushed, trying to hide her face with her hat. She said that she wanted to thank him all day if he didn't mind, and she asked if there were girls who gave him kakal. Ravnar knelt before her, right in the water. Looking into her face, he said that there were no such things, but he very much hoped that he could get it from her if she allowed it. He handed her the sword, offering to attach the kakal. The girl looked at it, remembering where she had seen it. Suddenly, she said in surprise that it was just like the sword of Baluk, which the holy knight Avilion holds. And in the portrait, it was the same, white and with the same silver pattern. But Avalon was gone and Baluka was stolen. She asked if the sword was just similar. Rev remained silent. Yriel apologized. She had talked too much. She really likes the story about the saint and Avilion. Smiling, he replied that everything was fine, and so was he. Seeing her so happy warmed his own heart. He asked her if there would be any problems, reminding her that he was a commoner. She blushed and said that his status was not important. Her feelings would not change. He smiled, but he was not happy with it. He did not want her to be bullied. Rising and holding out his hand to her, Rev said that if he won at Ribéry, he would swear allegiance to her as a knight. He asked if Yriel would trust him and wait for him. The girl hesitated. Ed would be participating in Emperor Ribéry's gladiator tournament, and he was quite strong. She was worried that Rev might get hurt. Before she took his hand, she said she had one condition. He must not get into trouble, and if it was dangerous, he must refrain and not get involved. He smiled and agreed, and the girl took his hand. He was sure that he would keep their promise. At night, when Yriel was sleeping, her father and brother came to her, saying that they would be able to finish earlier than expected. They injected her with something. Ribéry final. The host announces the contenders for the place of the winner. On the field, a strong guy, who flew here like a comet, and his rival, Edmund Heim, is a genius swordsman from the Marquis Heim family. It was time to find out who would emerge victorious in this competition. Yriel was very excited. Early. Ed has been watching his sister for an hour now as she can't decide on an outfit. After putting on another one, his brother evaluates her appearance as beautiful. Suddenly, he says that if she loves him, he will not interfere with her. Rejoicing, she grabbed his hands, thanked him, and said that he was the only one on her side. Battlefield. Yriel looks for Ravnar from the tribune. Estelle indignantly asked who she was looking for. Suddenly, the girl screamed, "Rav." Rev pulled his hood down and turned to face her, smiling sweetly. Yriel waved happily at him. She thought he looked adorable. The speaker announces that Ravnar is an ordinary knight who has been fighting with a one-handed sword since the beginning of Ribéry, and he is interested in what he can surprise the audience with today. The fight begins. Ravnar draws a shining sword from its sheath. The crowd is shocked. The members of the imperial family are confused. One of them cried out in surprise when he learned that Ravnar is a swordmaster. The opponent attacks. Rev deftly knocks the sword out of his hands, putting his own to his neck. The opponent surrenders. The crowd cheers. The guy turns around and waves to Yriel. On his sword was a kakal given to him by the lady. He took it in his hands and kissed it tenderly. The girl blushed. On the other side of the platform sat male aristocrats. They saw signs of attention from Ravnar towards Yriel. One of them was indignant, turning to the Marquis. His daughter rejected his proposal of marriage. But what was her father thinking? Marrying her off to a commoner. The father threw up his hands, saying that it was his mistake, but what parents would go against their children? She is still young and does not know much, but they love each other. Even their father is not an obstacle for them, he continued. But still a commoner? His status will change tomorrow. The man objected and said that Ravnar hid the fact that he was a swordmaster. Isn't that a crime? The emperor ordered it to stop. He did not want to witness this spectacle on this beautiful day. After the duel, an angry Ed approached Raven, who was under the stands, and asked why he used the sword if there was no need for it. Rav didn't answer. And then Ed assumed that his sister was in danger and became sad. Ravnar saw how much he resembled his sister and stroked his head. saying that he doesn't think anything will happen, but it's better to be prepared. There is no need to worry if the event from 4 years ago will happen again, because this time everything will be different. The man smiled and went to the field. The speaker introduces the long-awaited finale and its participants, Edmund, Haim, and Ravnar. Exciting the audience, he wonders who will be the winner. Ravran noticed that Ed had eyes like Yriel. This almost gave Edmund a chance to hit him, but he was too agile. The fight is over. Ravran wins. Standing before the Emperor, he asked what the winner wished for. Rev thought, 320 years ago, he had made a wish in this place. Because he felt sorry for her, he wanted to intercede for her. He wished to leave the castle of Ribery and refused to become her successor. This time, things would be different. Kneeling before the Emperor, Ravran said that he wanted to enter Ribery Castle and become his successor, because he didn't want to make stupid choices like he did then. Ribery, founder of the Hellenaire Empire, relative of the Holy Knight Avalon. 500 years ago, this family gave birth to many brilliant magicians and ministers, and also produced the largest number of saints. After Avion's death, her name was taken over by the imperial family, but if a successor appears, they will be obliged to return the family to him. Father looked at Ravnar, thinking that he already owned thousands of books on magic, but wanted to get the records and relics associated with the saint. Kidahin protested. He appealed to His Majesty, saying that if he fulfilled his request, the entire kingdom would fall into ruin. How could a commoner become a duke in a day? The Emperor jumped up from his chair and shouted furiously that he had the right to fulfill any wish of the conqueror of Ribery. How dared he dispute it? He sat down and thought. Now mana ceased to exist, so magic books and artifacts became useless. This is quite acceptable, and if he fulfills his wish, he will become the Emperor who fulfilled the greatest wish. He was worried about the sword master who appeared after 5 years. Ravnar's skills and abilities were recognized. The wish was granted, and he became the heir of Ribery. He went to Yriel, and when he reached the platform, she rushed towards him and threw herself into his arms. Her hat flew off. She looked up at him and, reaching higher, kissed Ravnar. He was amazed. Taking her hands, he said that he loved her from their first meeting and asked permission to be with her, a fragment from the past. The knight, kneeling, confesses his love to the saint, saying in Latin, "My love is in your heart," the girl answers him, "My love is yours." Standing on the battlefield, Ravnar said that he loved Yriel. She was embarrassed and happily replied that she loved him too. She had always loved him. Very much. Seeing what was happening, the family rushed to the girl. The father shouted to Ravnar that he would not allow this even after a public confession. The boy smiled back, saying that his father could call him whatever he wanted. For example, son-in-law. The brother protested because they were not yet engaged. Rev turned to Yriel and asked if they would be engaged. The girl asked if it was necessary, and if he wanted, they could go on a date. The father struggled to stand on his feet. The Marquis asked where Ravnar was staying. The boy replied that if his father-in-law allowed it, he could stay at the Haim estate. Yriel beamed with happiness. Arriving at the estate, Rev elegantly offered his hand to the girl getting out of the carriage. The brother, passing by, said that he thought his sister would be alone forever, and Rev playfully ruffled his hair. Ed asked him to stop, to which he replied apologetically that he wanted to try it so much. At dinner, the girl could not believe her happiness that she was having dinner with Rev. She felt like she was in a dream and was very embarrassed. Turning to his wife, the father said that if their son-in-law continued to live here, his daughter would die of hunger. He could not remember the last time she had eaten so little. The mother threatened the father with a fork, and he fell silent. Ravnar cut the meat and suggested to Yriel that if she had no appetite, perhaps she could try it like this. The girl melted under his attention. She looked at his lips and was a little disappointed that she was not tall enough to reach them that time, but only reached his chin. Her brother asked her if she was tired, suggesting that she go to bed early that day. Her father agreed and asked the maid to accompany her. Yriel did not want to leave, but she could not contradict her father. She stood up and said goodbye to Reverend. In the room, the girl was weaving a wreath of flowers and imagining their sweet kiss in the garden. She could think of nothing else. Late at night, her father came into her room, checked that his daughter was asleep, and invited Ravnar in. He saw a wreath lying on the floor and sadly picked it up. Father opened it. Ravnar approached and touched her forehead. Her hair and eyelashes shone gold. Rev took out a needle and pierced the skin on his wrist. He turned to his father, who began to take the blade out of its sheath. The son stopped him and asked him to let him today. The father refused, saying that he was still too young. It was his duty as a father, and he has to protect his mother and sister when his father is not around. The father cut his hand and the blood flowed onto the carpet. From the carpet, it suddenly rose up and began to enter the girl's hand. The brother covered his nose and mouth with his hand, tears welling up in his eyes. He thought it must be very painful for her. He prayed that the saint's blood would just disappear. He wondered why his sister, no one would want such power. He really hoped that she wouldn't remember anything. 4 years ago, an exhausted father rides in a carriage, complaining about how difficult the task was and how tired he is of it. The Marquis presents to the emperor the monster Nukda, which he caught in the gorge of Pokaria. In front of him is a huge cage covered with cloth. The emperor waved, saying that he would look at it later, ordering it to be locked up somewhere in the Marquis's estate. He could not keep such a monster in the imperial palace. This made the father angry. He didn't understand why he had to be asked to bring him at all, and he took the monster to his estate. At home, his children greeted him joyfully. Edmund noticed something covered with cloth. His father said it was a reward from His Highness, and he began to hug him, changing the subject to how he had grown in his absence. The boy pushed him away, saying that he was already 13 and his father had not taken him with him. He also wanted to see Nukdu. Yriel waved her finger, remembering her father's words that even if his son outgrew him, he still wouldn't be able to win. Her father laughed, praising his daughter. Edmund trained, thinking that he was already grown up and wanted to ride with them. He would become the second sword master of the Heim family, one of 4 in the empire. The guards were discussing the monster. They were worried that it might get out. They didn't like having to guard it after returning from the gorge. They thought that no one would notice if they left. A boy noticed them, hiding in the bushes. He watched what was happening. Yriel crept up from behind, and he was scared. He thought that if he showed Nukdu, she would like it too. He offered to show her something funny. They entered the dungeon. The girl did not like the strange smell, and her father forbade them to go there, but her brother promised to protect her. Nukdu's cell. Nothing was visible, only darkness. Suddenly, eyes flashed, and the monster went berserk, frightening the children. The boy tried to calm his sister down, saying that the monster was locked up. The monster began to scratch the bars furiously. The children were terrified and couldn't move. Suddenly, a huge beast with long claws, sharp fangs, and pitch-black fur crawled out. It roared and sank its claws into Edmund's chest. The boy hung on his paw, bleeding. Yriel sat on the floor and cried, unable to move for fear. The monster bit Ed's arm and the girl screamed. Ed was still conscious. His sister grabbed a wooden stick and started hitting the beast. The monster turned around and his brother was horrified. He begged. Just not her? Ed stuck his sword in Nukdu's eyes. The beast roared and fell to the floor. The bloodied brother sat motionless. Edmund is in bed. The whole family gathered around. The doctor says the poison is spreading from his hand to his heart. If this continues, he won't last a day. The man insists on amputating his arm. The father is horrified and begs the doctor to help in another way at any cost. The doctor says there is no other choice. If they want less pain, they must do it themselves. The father, furious, grabs the doctor by the collar. Ed opened his eyes, asking for his father's forgiveness, tears streaming down his face. He believed that the Heim heir with the amputated arm, the knife in his parents' back. The father falls to his knees in front of his son, convincing him that he will survive. His father will save him. Yriel, feeling guilty, begins to sob. Mom hugs her shoulders. The father takes up the sword, deciding to save his son. Yriel's hair turns golden, and she, not knowing what she's doing, takes her brother's sword and cuts her hand, letting drops of blood fall on his face. At that very moment, Ed's hand becomes completely healthy. Yriel smiles and loses consciousness. Falling to the floor, her mother manages to catch her. The doctor was horrified. He shouted that it was holy blood. And he called the girl a saint, 300 years ago. The crowd under the White Castle begs the saint to give them her blood. She cuts her finger and gives her blood. People discussed its magical properties, saying that if you bathe in its blood, will a person live forever? If you wear clothes in holy blood? If you drink holy blood? People wanted more holy blood, and it was spilled every day. The goddess Gaia could not watch her daughter suffer. And in the end, She took this power. The saint's blood could no longer heal people. Standing before the emperor, he shouted at her, "How dare she, a witch!" He believed that she was trying to pass herself off as a saint. He gave the order that the sinner Maria would be burned at the stake. The girl was horrified by his words. Mother Yriel, crying over her daughter, screamed that her daughter was not a saint. The doctor jumped up, shouting that they needed to report to the palace immediately. Father stopped him. Yriel opened her eyes. They were golden like her hair. She began to scream in pain. Her parents tried to calm her down. Her father ordered no one to enter. Yriel screamed. She begged them to stop. She said she was not a witch. Father understood that she was remembering what had happened 300 years ago, the torture she had gone through. There was a flash of light. A magical seal appeared on the floor, and a man with a sword appeared in front of them. The father ordered his wife to hold Yriel tighter and took out his sword. The girl looked at him and said, "Avion." The man in the cloak pushed the Marquis's sword away and walked towards the girl, claiming that she needed him. He touched her face, telling her to calm down and look into his eyes. Taking her in his arms, holding her hand tightly, he said it was a dream. He tried to convince her that it was all a dream, a regular nightmare. Now he would protect her. She would not have nightmares anymore. But the girl replied that she was a saint. She needed to heal people. Avillon said that she was not a saint, but Yriel. The girl was sure that she should be alone. He assured her that her family and he were all with her. No one would leave her. She would not be alone. She asked him not to leave. He said he wouldn't leave. She needed to close her eyes and sleep. The mother burst into tears, hysterically screaming that her daughter was not a saint. She did not need to go to the Holy Palace. She could not send her little daughter away. They did not even know what they would do to her there. Father held Dell, trying to calm her down and convince her that no one would take her. Father thought he had to hide Yriel, but he didn't know where. The stranger suddenly said that there was a way to hide her abilities. The father asked if he was the reincarnation of a holy knight, and if his daughter was a saint. The man replied that she was not a saint, and he was no longer a holy knight. Ravnar, that was his name. Father thought, Ravnar? The sword reminiscent of Baluku, and also Yriel's reaction. He is definitely not a human. He did not know if they could trust him, if he was making the right choice. He asked how they could do this. Ravnar put the girl on the floor and stood up, saying that first they had to shut up everyone involved. The father switched off the doctor. Ravnar suggested possible scenarios. They could erase or seal their memories. If they were mentally weak, erasing their memories would turn them into idiots. Sealing is risky, but not so dangerous to health. The doctor saw how the girl changed. She is the second saint in the last 300 years, so her memories are strong. Ravnar suggested killing the doctor. He said a cantham. The father is shocked, thinking that it is a sword from the magical vault. The room became dark. A magical seal flashed, and a man appeared before them, bowing before Ravnar. He asked if he had summoned him. He ordered him to take the doctor and make it look like an accident. The man took the doctor on his shoulder and carried him away with the help of a magic seal, disappearing into the room. The father looked at the boy suspiciously. An inhuman creature using magic. He thought he was an elf or a celestial being, but only demons can summon other demons as helpers. He asked what they said. Gaia opened the gates of heaven for him. Why did he become a demon? Ravnar answered, so as not to repeat the same mistakes. It will seal their memories and put restrictions on everything else. But if a lot of people die at once or become idiots, it will be suspicious. If the memory is not something special for them, then the seal will hold. The father cried out that if it breaks. The man only replied that he would figure it out himself. Father asked if he would seal Yriel's memory. Ravnar got angry, saying that this was all Gaia's doing. First, she gives the ability, then she takes it away. A terrible creature. He cast a spell so that when her seal was lifted, he would be summoned automatically. The boy asked if anyone had left the estate. Father replied that since the attack on Ed, no one has been allowed to leave the house, and everyone is being watched. Everyone is here, so he can just seal the memories of those who remain. Ravnar closed his eyes and magic began to spread throughout the house. Father was surprised. His mental magic was very strong. Now it's the girl's turn. In order to suppress the holy blood, the father's blood is needed. The father was scared. Ravnar assured that he would not harm her, thinking that only he would be hurt. Ravnar took out a silver needle and drew a seal on the girl's wrist. As he did so, he wept bitterly. Tears streamed down his face. The seal disappeared. The man stood up, saying that Yriel is still young. If a strong seal is put on, she might get hurt. Also, this is her first seal, so a lot of blood will be needed. The blood of her parents. Father asked how much. Ravnar answered. 700 milliliters from each. Father took his wife's hands. Calming her down, he took out his sword. Having cut his wife's hand, the blood began to rise up and enter Yriel's hand. The mother covered her mouth with her hand in horror, saying, "Was it really possible that the saint was treated like this every day?" Del lost consciousness due to the massive loss of blood. Ravnar looked at the girl, wondering what color her eyes were. Blue like her father's, or green like her mother's. If they were blue, he would love her like the clear sky. If they are the color of fresh foliage, then he will love her just as the morning rays love all the greenery of this world. He didn't care what kind of eyes she had. Holding the girl tenderly in his arms, he thought that the main thing was that he could look at them with his own. He hugged her, praying in his head for her to grow up soon. There were so many things he wanted to do with her. He cried. He dreamed of a normal life where he could hear her voice and communicate by looking into her eyes. He missed her very much. They sat over tea and discussed what had happened. The father wondered why Gaia had not sealed the memories properly since she was a goddess, and whether his daughter was the reincarnation of a saint. Ravnar said that giving something and then taking it back is a common practice for gods. If not for today's events, the seal could have dissipated in 15 years. This situation only accelerated the process. He quoted the words of the goddess Gaia. "I will allow you to live normally until you are 15, and then do your duty as a saint for the rest of your life." He asked angrily, "Isn't that the same as giving and then taking away?" Ravnar said goodbye to the girl, holding her hand. She asked him not to leave. He asked for forgiveness and promised to come next time. If you seal her memories at age 20, the age at which Maria died, she will be safe. Until then, they should not see each other, because Ravnar is the one who awakens her memories. Every 15th day of the month, he will come and seal her memory. The father looked sadly after the man, thinking that although he remembered everything, he could not meet her. Although she had forgotten everything, she still yearned for him. He did not understand why the goddess Gaia was so cruel. The boy was anxiously spinning around his sister's bed. His father, with an extremely serious look, told him that his sister was not a saint. In the future, she would only be Yriel. Yriel doesn't even remember what happened today. Her eyes and hair have returned to their previous state. The father continued, saying that Ed had to remember something to protect his sister. From now on, they couldn't get hurt anymore, because if they did, his sister's memories would come out. Looking at the boy, he asked if he understood what his father was trying to convey to him. Ed tensed up and agreed. He promised not to get into trouble again. Yriel woke up and ran out of the room as if scalded, discovering that it was already lunchtime. Her parents greeted her. The father was delighted to see her and said that he thought she was a sleepy fairy. A new record? Slept all day. He nudged his wife to confirm. The girl was a little upset. She didn't even remember how she fell asleep. Her father stroked her head and invited her to the table. Taking her hand, they went together. The 15th day of the 1336th year of the reign of the Hellenair Empire. The day when Yriel lost part of the secret. The story returns to the present day. While walking in the garden, Yriel calls Rav to her. Taking a chair from the bushes, she brings it to him and stands on top of him. They look into each other's eyes. Their cheeks flush, and Yriel hears the call of the maid who has been trying in vain to wake her. Opening her eyes, Yriel didn't want to believe that it was a dream. Suddenly, she remembered that Rev was visiting them. Throwing on a robe, she ran to the window, looking around to see if he was nearby. Seeing Ravnar standing on the lawn by the tree, the girl called out to him. He turned around and she waved cheerfully at him. Rev, seeing her revealing nightgown, blushed and waved back shyly. Behind her, the maid was grumbling, saying that she would fall like that, and she wasn't even dressed properly. She ordered her to return to her chambers. Yriel asked Rav to wait for her. He smiled silently and waved back. The man standing behind the tree asked if he needed to go. Rev frowned, asking if he had seen. The man lowered his head, claiming he had been looking at the ground. He noticed that Rev looked happy. He finally looked like a real person. Before, only sadness had appeared on his face. The man continued. saying that now Rev was smiling like a normal man. No, like the happiest man in the world. Rev looked up. The sounds of running could be heard from the window. Something was falling loudly. He said that this is happiness. He is in seventh heaven, hinting that a Akantam should also find his happiness. Yriel happily ran up to Rev. Seeing the stranger, she asked who it was. The man was speechless from the beauty of the girl, and Rev introduced him as his friend. Akantham turned around in surprise, but agreed. The girl introduced herself as Rev's beloved, and perhaps soon to be bride, Yriel, Haim of the Haim family, and she extended her hand to the man to shake it. Akantham tensed up and, without taking her hand, simply bowed and introduced himself. This surprised Rav and the girl, so Rev, smiling, patted the man on the chest and said that he was an ordinary knight, not like him. Perhaps for him it was a little strange. Yriel answered that everything was fine. She asked if they had been friends since childhood, and whether it was possible that Akantam was also 27 years old. He turned to Rev, his face asking how he could convince her they were both 27. Rev turned away innocently. He felt awkward, but he agreed, assuming he was 27. Yriel happily said that it turned out that they had grown up together since they were little, and dreamily asked what Rev was like then, noting that he was delightful now. Akantham promised to tell about it at their next meeting, and they said goodbye. Rev asked why she didn't ask him about it. The girl answered that it was more fun to hear about it from others. He suggested that it would be better to ask him, since Rev wanted to talk to her about so many things. Yriel agreed that if he wanted to tell her something, she would definitely listen to him. She smiled so sweetly that Rev blushed. The weather was fine. Rav said that he wanted to do something with Yriel on such a fine day and invited her to follow him. In the clearing, Yriel saw a beautiful, pitch-black horse. She was delighted by her beauty. The beast's gaze seemed to ask where she was looking, whether this was the first time she saw such a dazzling divine creature. The girl hid behind Rev, thinking that the horse was very big. The man cast a serious glance at the animal, hinting to him to behave well. The horse snorted in his face. Yriel was surprised by the horse's behavior. It seemed to her as emotional as a person. Ravnar asked if she liked it and offered to pet it. She looked at him thinking that the color of her mane resembled the color of Rev's hair. So beautiful. If she bites her, it will hurt. But she still wanted to pet the animal. The man waved at the horse to come closer. The animal clearly didn't like it. Since it didn't consider itself a dog, it started to stamp its hooves and neigh angrily, hinting that it wasn't a pet, but a divine creature. Then the horse came right up to them and snorted loudly, showing its displeasure. A tense atmosphere reigned between it and Ravnar. They looked menacingly into each other's eyes. Yriel admired the horse's strength and size, saying that she had never seen one like it before. Ravnar said that his friend had brought her, assuring the girl that although he looked vicious, he would not bite her. He threw his arm around the animal's neck and smiled at it, making it clear that he had no other choice. Other hand, he took Yriel's hand and placed it on the horse's muzzle. The girl stroked it. The beast was surprised. It was pleasant. Yriel admired the horse, saying how soft it was. She sat with a satisfied grin and enjoyed it. Ravnar lowered his head with a sigh, thinking that the divine creature had been tamed. The girl asked if he had called her to ride a horse. Ravnar fell into memories. When the saint was little, she brought a starving cat to the palace. Seeing this, the priests were furious. They considered the filthy beast unworthy of a saint and ordered the saint to be taken to a solitary confinement cell to be cleansed. The priests dragged the saint until she could not take her eyes off the poor kitten that they were going to throw out, and the child was locked in a cold room. After this incident, the saint no longer touched the animals, but simply looked at them from afar. The saint stood near the castle, admiring the horses. Avillon noticed her, approached her. He asked if she wanted to go for a ride. Next to him stood a beautiful, snow-white horse. He assured her that everything would be fine, because the horse was tamed. Her eyes lit up with interest, and she agreed. Suddenly, with a cry on horseback, came Dart, the head of Ribéry, and also the father of Avillon. He hated the saint because his son had left home and become a knight because of his love for this girl. He tore her feelings to shreds and separated them. The saint left, although the knight desperately called her and asked her to stay. Falling to his knees, he prayed to Gaia. He so wanted to see the saint smile. He asked the goddess to free this girl. Ravnar leaned over to Yriel and offered her a ride. He asked the girl to wait and quickly harnessed the horse. He assured her that everything would be fine. He would help her get into the saddle. Sitting down, Yriel noticed how close Ravnar's lips were. She really wanted to kiss him, but she was tormented by doubts. She blushed, but still did not dare to do it. Rav asked what happened. Yriel kept saying "Po." He couldn't understand her. When suddenly she looked at the horse and asked what its name was, saying that Poppy would suit her. The man laughed. He said she didn't have a name yet, so they called her Great, but if she wanted, they could call her Poppy. The horse turned around angrily, looking at them questioningly. She stamped her hooves in protest and began to snort angrily, spraying drool everywhere. Yriel thought she didn't like it. Rev kicked the horse and she calmed down, thinking that he thought he could do whatever he wanted just because he was a contractor. Yriel still decided that such a name would not suit the stallion. The man reassured her, saying it was a girl. The girl happily turned to the horse, calling her Poppy. The horse was unpleasantly surprised. She thought that when the contract ended, she would run away without looking back. Ravnar couldn't take his eyes off Yriel. He thought she could smile like that. But he didn't know. If only they could ride like that all the time. He would give anything for that. The man offered her breakfast. Yriel thought that hunger was absolutely unimportant now. She would like to sit like this all day. He almost understood her thoughts and added that they could continue after breakfast. Ravnar carefully took Yriel off his horse, saying that he would like to get something before breakfast, but only she could help with it. He asked if she would refuse him. The girl was excited that this could happen. He caught her in his arms and said that only today. Then he gently kissed her chin. They both blushed with embarrassment. Rev put Yriel down on the ground. She looked into his beautiful eyes and reached out to him, kissing him on the lips. The horse, not wanting to interfere with their tenderness, galloped away. Their long, tender kiss turned into a passionate one. And Rev pressed the girl against the wall, holding her hands, when suddenly Rev turned around and grabbed the blade of the dagger flying at him. It was Ed, who had caught them off guard. The man let go of Yriel's hand, and she was upset that it was all over. Ravnar touched her face, asking for forgiveness for being too hasty, as she was still too young. She was ashamed to admit that she wanted more. Ed angrily approached his sister and pushed Rev away, calling him a thief and emphasizing that they were not even engaged. Rev felt embarrassed by his infatuation. Yriel didn't understand her brother. This kind of thing always happens between a guy and a girl. What's there to be angry about? He grabbed her hand and led her away. She didn't dare contradict him, and only said goodbye to Reverend. Rev sat down on the ground, thinking sadly that patience was his best character trait. Past. The saint sits in her room, dreamily drawing herself an Avalon with colored pencils, not knowing how to depict the color silver. There was a knock at the door. It was Avalon. He came out to him and spread his cloak on the floor. They sat on it, and the saint showed him the drawing. The man's eyes shone with joy. He was delighted and asked if it was for him. Maria nodded sheepishly, saying that she had not had the opportunity to paint it silver. He took her hand, explaining that he hated his hair. If it weren't for his silver eyes and hair and her gold, they would be ordinary people. He would wait until she grew up. And then they would get to know each other better. And if that time came, he would wait for her. Avion looked at the girl pitifully, saying that he was actually waiting now, because he really wanted her to belong to him. He touched her face, but Maria turned away abruptly. He looked away with a saddened expression, saying that he had made a mistake and asking her not to take it to heart. The man continued that if reincarnation existed, he would like black hair like the one in the picture. And when the time came, he would find her. The girl stood up abruptly and left. Having locked the door, she sat down on the floor with her face buried in her knees. She thought that if such a time really came, she would answer honestly, just as he wanted, a beautiful sunny morning. Yriel is sorting through tubes of paint. She was sad looking at them. Tears came to her eyes. The maid came in, inviting the young mistress to breakfast. The girl rushed around the room, knowing that Rev was there too. The maid sighed because Yriel was used to rejecting all the prince's offers. The girl looked out and said that he was different. He was very handsome. Kitahine, the first prince, gave her a huge green gem. The second prince, Alphonse, showered her with compliments and made her a platinum statue. But Yriel refused them all. Neither expensive stones nor her own statue could melt her heart, because she really liked her attractive appearance. Avion's name is etched in the literature of Ribery. He was as beautiful in words as he was in pictures, so handsome that entire families lined up to ask for his hand. People said that when he closed his eyes, a shower of stars began, and when he opened them, their breath caught. He is the only one of the Ribery family who is remembered for his appearance, not his abilities. Moreover, after his reincarnation, everyone around him had a strikingly beautiful appearance. Yriel thought it was logical that he had high standards. The maid asked what scent the young mistress would choose today. She asked for a mature lady's scent, for example, the scent of roses, the one he would like. She liked the smell. She thought it would suit him too. Anna said she would give the perfume to the one who served him. The maid asked why she had taken out the paints so early. Yriel happily replied that she wanted to paint Rav. Yriel has excellent hand dexterity. Despite her clumsiness, she often did things like knitting, embroidery, and cooking. She is also very good at drawing, and even artists praise her. The woman noted that the young gentleman had a sparring match with the Duke today. Wouldn't her brother be upset if she only drew his opponent? Yriel thought it would be too embarrassing to draw alone, so she decided to call Estelle. Before Estelle could enter the house, Yriel pounced on her with hugs. The girl began to push her away, but Yriel was too persistent and glad to see her. Estelle covered her flushed face with her fan. She liked Yriel's gentle nature and kind heart. Since childhood, she began to get tired of people who got close to her because of her family and status, and then talked about her behind her back. Yriel was the first one to truly befriend her when she didn't have a single real friend. The girl was very sociable, so she had a wide circle of friends, but she boldly broke off communication with those who insulted Estelle, and she was the only one who truly thought Estelle was beautiful and amazing. Yriel had always been like that, handed Estelle a box of paints and said that she was painting Rev, and Estelle was painting Ed. The girl hesitated, and then indignantly attacked Yriel. The girl begged, saying that in gratitude she would cook something for her. Estelle screamed that she was not an animal to be sold for food. During the sparring, Ravnar praised Ed, saying that he always had amazing skills. When he sparred with him, he thought that he would never become a master. Ed replied that Rev was not from a knightly family, and that he had been holding a sword since he could walk. But he had heard that Rev first took hold of the hilt at the age of 13. Rev was still much better than him, because he became a master in 10 years. After drinking some water, the man said that Ed was good at everything. It was hard to believe that he hardly practiced. Rev thought it was odd that monsters were suddenly declared the prey a week before the competition. The boy thought they were too dangerous. He asked Rev if monsters were like his family. Rev replied that not all creatures listened to him, of Yriel in good spirits and not so much Estelle. They greeted each other. Yriel happily announced that the girls had decided to draw. She would draw him. But first, she suggested something to eat. Yriel opened the basket and began to lay out all sorts of cookies. She told them that there were cookies with figs, strawberry jam, and sweets and crackers. Everything that the heart desires. Rev looked at her pitifully, saying that she had tried so hard to make this for them. Everything was so beautiful. How could he eat it? The girl happily handed him a plate of fig cookies, saying that if she remembered correctly, he liked the mild taste, not the sickly sweet one. Ravnar took a bite of the cookie and smiled, praising its wonderful taste. Across from them sat Estelle and Ed, who clearly did not like their tenderness. Yriel said that Estelle had agreed to draw Ed. Estelle looked up and proudly confirmed it. Ed was so shocked that he dropped his cookie. She was indignant at Ed's displeasure, but he only replied that he had never seen her draw. An argument began between them. Yriel and Rev, looking at them, decided that they were perfect for each other. Yriel asked Rav, confused, who was serving him. She wanted to know something. He was surprised. Anna, seeing what was happening, mentally prayed that he would not speak. Otherwise, the Duke's innocence would end. The man thought for a moment, saying that he hadn't asked her name, but she was a brunette, had brown eyes, and was tall. He was interrupted by Anna, who had come up to them and was insistently offering tea to the Duke. Rev began to drink it. Estelle was sitting at a table with Ed, sketching. He handed her a plate of cookies, saying she hadn't eaten many of them, but he knew she liked them. The girl blushed and said that the models had to sit quietly and still. Otherwise, she couldn't guarantee that she would be able to draw him well. Ed watched Estelle. He wondered how hard she was trying, and whether her hands had always been so small. Estelle was uncomfortable with his gaze, but she continued to create stubbornly. Setting up her easel, Yriel was glad to have the chance to look at Rav for as long as she wanted. She concentrated on drawing her lover sitting before her. The man stood up, looking curiously at the canvas. He was shocked by what he saw. Yriel was drawing the two of them holding hands. She sheepishly closed the drawing, forbidding him to look at the unfinished work. Rev froze, looking very sad. He wondered if Yriel knew that she had painted before too, and that alone was enough to please him. But he couldn't help when she didn't have enough materials. For him, that was the most precious gift. Ravnar kept thinking that she regretted that incident, and that was why she was painting the same picture, and he couldn't move from his spot. Estelle finished drawing. Her drawing was terrible. Ed thought she drew a potato. He tried to thank her very tactfully, saying that she had discovered a new sense of beauty while they were apart. So fresh and creative, he promised to cherish it. Yriel shows the finished drawing to Reverend. She said happily that she liked how his eyes turned out. These paints were a gift from her father. She really enjoyed painting with them. They gave a lot of shades. A memory of Maria came into his head, telling him that she didn't have enough paint to capture him in a drawing. And Rev said it was great. He really liked it. It was the best gift he had ever received. He looked happy. Yriel promised to draw him again later, and he asked that next time she draw them under the moonlight. And just like when they held hands, he silently prayed that these painful memories would be filled with happiness from now on. The 25th day of the year, 1320 of the reign of the Empire of Helenair. Every 5 years, a hunting competition is held a few days after Ribbery. This year, there was a rumor that got a lot of attention that there would be real monsters there. Mother fell ill and asked Yriel to go and support the family, and for Mother too. Riding in the carriage, Yriel admired the beautiful green foliage. She turned to Ravnar, asking about Poppy, as he was planning to take her to the competition. The man replied that he had sent her to a friend. She would be glad to hear that Yriel was worried about her. As they exited the carriage, they met Estelle, and Yriel immediately rushed to hug her with a scream. Father asked Rev if Poppy was the divine beast green, and if he had named it that. He pointed out that Rev's ability to choose names was simply terrible. Ravnar, angry, rudely replied that the correct name would be Greenfin, not Green. And he was interested in what Marquis Poppy didn't like about it. The man was very surprised by this reaction because he had started this conversation for fun. Thinking, he said, "Who would name a horse like that?" And Rev said, "Yriel." The Marquis was extremely surprised. He laughed cheerfully and patted Rav on the shoulder, saying, "What a cute name. Isn't his daughter a cutie?" The men set off. The girls wished them luck. Estelle noticed the blue, like his eyes, shawl on Ed's sword and asked who gave it to him. Yriel replied that of course it was her, since he was not engaged yet. She rushed to embrace Estelle joyfully, saying that she would be in 7th heaven if she married him. The girl was very embarrassed and asked Yriel not to talk nonsense, but to watch the event that was about to begin. The Emperor was giving a speech. For the first time in history, they would hunt monsters. He ordered a competition and to show how strong the Helenair Empire was. The servant informed the Emperor that most of the imperial troops, including 5 swordmasters, had entered the hunting grounds. The participants were safe because they were hunting small monsters. However, others were in danger. Families, friends, lovers who came to support them. People dear to the participants. A downpour came down. Yriel, hiding in the tent, looked through the impenetrable curtain and hoped that no one would catch a cold. From the neighboring tent came the worried voice of the Emperor. The girl trembled, not understanding why suddenly Estelle came up to her and took her hand, convincing her that everything was okay. She saw the prince in the imperial tent, laughing nastily. This scared her quite a bit. Suddenly the rain stopped. Lightning struck. People saw some flying creature in the sky. A loud clap of thunder and something fell to the ground. It was a monster. Meanwhile, the men were hunting low-level monsters the size of a hare. It wasn't the first time that Ravnar noticed frightened birds flying in the sky from the direction of the tents. As Ed sheathed his sword, he saw that his cockle had cracked. Rev was sure that something was going on. The tent city was attacked by many huge winged monsters. They tore people to shreds. People ran from place to place in panic. Yriel watched in horror as she watched, unsure of what she was supposed to do. One of the monsters spotted her and approached her, blood dripping from his mouth. Estelle shielded her friend with herself, calling on Siegel to help them. A huge fire spirit appeared and began to destroy the monster with flames. The monster screamed wildly. Yriel prayed for someone to stop it. There was a surge of magic. The seal lit up and a cantham appeared. He grabbed the girls and carried them up the mountain. He placed a dome over the monsters. Exhaling, he wondered why these high-level creatures had come here. Who could have made them do this? Estelle raised her fan at the man. Yriel stopped her, saying that this was a friend of Rav. She opened her eyes and saw death. There were rivers of blood around. Her eyes flashed gold. She did not understand what to do. The little boy looked down and conducted the twig. He was surprised how it could all end like this. Heaven. The boy, the chaos god, didn't want to take away the opportunity to meet her after so long, but it was obvious that when that woman came, she would immediately start nagging at him. He thought about it and decisively waved his hands. Lightning struck and broke the dome. Another wave and a cantham is sealed. The boy orders him to return to his master, and he disappeared. The girls stood dumbfounded in the empty space, not knowing what to do now. Creatures crawled out of the forest. Estelle called for Siegel. This scared the monsters away a little. Yriel grabbed Estelle's hand, asking how they were going to get out. Yriel was very worried that Estelle would not be hurt in any way. She was determined to protect her. She thought that even if she took the blow immediately, and she screamed in pain. Estelle leaned over Yriel. She turned around. The creatures were gathering around them. She thought about what to do, seeing no safe place. In desperation, she screamed, asking for help. She couldn't hold her spirit for long. Her strength was running out. Yriel opened her eyes. Estelle was calling her when suddenly she started coughing up blood and fell unconscious. Yriel looked at the dying Estelle. She heard people screaming for help and she cried. She believed that she had to save everyone because she was a saint. Her hair and eyes turned gold. Estelle opened her eyes. She was surprised. Yriel reassured her. She would protect her because she could not be harmed. The magic seal flashed. An angry Ravnar descended from the sky. He began to tie up the monsters one by one with threads and tear their bodies. He heard his name being called, like Avion. Turning around in horror, he saw the golden-haired Yriel and rushed towards her. He wiped the tears from her face, saying that now he was near. No one would dare to harm her. They hugged. Yriel said that Estelle was hurt. People were suffering. She had to help them. He cried out that she couldn't do that. She had to help only her friends and the people who had helped her. He tried to convince her that she was not a saint. She was Yriel. The girl approached Estelle and dripped blood onto her right from her mouth. Ravnar realized that she had bitten her tongue and rushed to beg her to stop. Yriel looked at Ravnar. He was crying bitterly. She remembered the promise she had given to the knight, to live for him. Then she said that she had made a decision to live only for him. From now on, she was a saint only for her friends. She touched his face, promising him that she would help only them. Yriel froze, closing her eyes. Ravnar looked and did not believe his eyes. The girl uses the seal on herself, voluntarily gets rid of the power and memories. Tears streamed down his face uncontrollably, wondering if she would really live for him. Heaven. Chaos is furious. He was ordered to stop killing. He asked if he really should stop and if he could do it again. The goddess Gaia sighed, saying that he was acting too stupid to be called a god. She was furious that he was killing her beloved people just for fun. She scolded him because he opened a hole to the human world. The demons went berserk, not to mention the poor humans. Chaos concluded that the demons needed to be killed too. He heard an alarm bell ring. He created a mirror in the air showing Yriel and asked Gaia if her daughter had gone against her will. Chaos said that he shouldn't have sent her if she had listened to him. Then Avilon wouldn't have left. Because of her, he was separated from the only member of his family that he cherished so much. Gaia was at the limit of her patience. He asked if she wanted his soul, saying that he did too. But what could he do? He was a tough guy. She turned and walked away, telling him to stop talking trash to her. He wondered why he couldn't talk about Ravnar. He wasn't an outcast. He pointed out that Ravnar was a member of his family. Why not talk about him in a good way? Gaia turned to look at Chaos and said that he was indeed not an outcast. He was still her family too. Reached the door. Chaos stopped her, asking why she didn't take care of the saint, or if she decided to leave everything as it was again. Why did she create her in the first place? Gaia silently slammed the door. Yriel collapsed into Ravnar's arms. He touched her hair and wondered. Was he so dear to her that she would abandon the duties of a saint that she considered so important? Could he afford to wish for more? There was a rustling in the bushes. The possessed prince emerged from them, saying that human bodies were too weak. He barely had the strength to reach them. He opened his arms and shouted joyfully, greeting his son. Rev squeezed out Chaos in shock. Chaos pointed out that it was rather rude of him to say his name so coldly. Chaos groveled before Ravnar, urging him to return to the afterlife. He would never be like these people. He would become a god. She's just a weakling. She's like Gaia. At the end of his impressive speech, he called him to the demon realm. Ravnar turned around and said seriously that if he touched her, he would not live. Chaos was upset by his reaction. He asked him why he hated him so much. He really didn't want to hurt them. No one would die. He just wanted to tease Ravnar a little, saying that it was a small joke. And anyway, Ravnar should be grateful to him, because only thanks to him he was able to meet his saint. Ravnar got angry, ordering Chaos not to call her a saint. He said that Chaos wanted to become a god by stealing the soul of a saint, which was what he had planned all along. He took Yriel in his arms and they flew away. Chaos thought it was time for him too. But seeing that his son's technique was rather clumsy, he decided to help Ravnar finish the job and destroyed the bodies. He laughed, and the prince's body fell to the ground. Flying in the sky, Rev called Greenfen. A plush horse toy appeared in front of him. Rev said that he had noticed her attitude towards him since last time. He ordered her to go to Acanthus and tell him to bring the Marquis and Ed to Castleheim. Ed would probably be worried, so she should tell him that they were all right. The horse arrived at the scene. There was blood and scattered bodies and grieving survivors everywhere. She saw Acanthum and headed towards him. Father tugged at Acanthum's collar, demanding an explanation as to why he couldn't use the magic of moving through space. Ravnar hadn't disappeared, after all. Acanthum answered briefly, "He was summoned by the Master, and demons cannot move in space on their own. Even though the Master is gone, they will all be fine." They didn't notice the horse running up to them until their father grabbed it angrily, shouting where Yriel and Estelle were now. The horse, with its last breath, told him that its master had asked him to tell them that the girls were safe and that they should go to Heim Manor immediately. The horse lay down on Acanthum's shoulder. The Marquis went to the carriage, finding the coachman dead. He felt sorry, decided to take full responsibility for his family, and wished him to rest in peace. Acanthum said that from now on they would use magic, and immediately the Marquis and the young master rose into the sky. Acanthum's wings, which looked like giant bat wings. He asked the demon why the monsters were attacking people in a place that wasn't their natural place. The man replied that this was the devil's work. He was interested in the king. Most likely, he did this to attract attention and see his reaction. The only child the devil loves is King Ravenar, and the king's wings were a gift from the devil himself. The father was upset, thinking that the gods were as selfish as humans. Ed was surprised and asked if Ravnar had wings like Acanthum, since he had never seen them. The demon replied that in fact Lord Ravnar could not have wings, because he had a human soul in a demonic body. Acanthum exhaled heavily, saying that in short, Lord Ravnar became a demon in a very unusual way. He is a sinless man. The father turned around in surprise, asking how that was possible. The man said there were two ways to become a demon. The first is if the parents themselves are demons. The second is if the soul is on the verge of destruction. In the second case, the gates of heaven will not open, because the gods do not want to accept such souls. And then the soul becomes a primitive demon, which lives for a very short time. Lord Ravnar became a demon not in the first or second way. There is also a third, very rare one, when the soul itself jumps into the fire and endures endless pain until it receives approval from the devil. Becoming a demon in this way would give one great power, but few could endure it. He had endured this hellish pain for over 100 years. For a normal person, this would be impossible. It was impossible to moan in pain or ask for help. He didn't even know when it would all end. Acanthum served him for more than 20 years, but never once saw him smile. Always an empty and indifferent look, these were not the eyes of a living being. However, on the saint's birthday, he saw him with a smile on his face for the first time. And now he smiles like the happiest man in the world. For this reason, he told them his story. They hung in the air for a while and then silently moved on. They entered the room where the sick lay. The father rushed to his daughter, and Ed asked why Estelle was not waking up. Ravnar explained that she was being treated with holy blood. The spirit she had summoned to protect Yriel had been returned to that world. She and her internal organs had suffered greatly. Ed sat down on the chair next to her bed and took her hand, looking sadly at her face. Ed asked Ravnar what kind of devil he was. He ruffled his hair, asking if he remembered what Rav said about Gaia. The boy answered yes. And the man said that Gaia is a supporter of the devil. The devil, meanwhile, was busy cooking and watching Ravnar through a magic mirror. Rav confidently said that the devil was simply crazy. Past. In the cave, Avalon cries for the loss of Mary, holding her in his arms and begging her not to leave him. Mary's spirit stood behind him. She asked not to take her to heaven because Avalon was in despair. He began to strangle himself, and Maria began to cry, blaming herself. She prayed to the goddess to allow him to be saved. Gaia watched her. She said that she understood that it was she who had given her such a cruel fate. But if she hesitated on the way to the heavenly gates, her soul could go astray. She promised in the next life to make sure that she was born and lived next to him. Maria asked what would happen to Avion if she left now. The goddess replied that she would see to it that he returned to the empire and continued to live a peaceful life. She swore to her, calling him to her. Mary could not leave Avalon until he died. She would be his guardian angel. Gaia could not fulfill her request. If she became his guardian angel, he would never be able to be reborn again. She said that she would allow her to return to him as she wished, calling her to her again. Maria asked to stay with Avion until the gates of heaven were closed, and Gaia agreed. She rushed to Avion and embraced him. The goddess promised to grant her the next life. She decided that she would live it only for herself. If he wants her love, she will give him her whole heart. If he does not want her to be a saint, she will not be one. She will use her powers only for him. Maria promised that in the next life, she would not make him cry. In the next life, she would become a sincere person and would live without hiding anything. She always wanted to tell Avion that she loved him. She was sorry that she never got to confess. She went to heaven and Gaia saved Avion. She tried to seal his memories. The memories of the saint must be sealed, but the resistance of the soul is too great. She separated them, not knowing that their feelings were so strong. Dart was looking for his son. The goddess spoke to him, saying that the knight was with the saint in the cave. She ordered him to arrange a funeral for the dead woman, and to return glory to the knight Ribéry, who defended the saint. He entered the cave and took his son away from there. And he did not even pay attention to the saint. The funeral of the saint took place according to the prophecy from heaven. Avion was fast asleep. He dreamed of Maria, and tears were streaming down his face. The father shouted, ordering to find a way to wake up his son. He had not woken up for 5 days. Avion jumped out of bed and headed for the exit to Maria. It was pouring rain outside, and he thought that she didn't like the cold. He had to hurry to her. His father hit him in the face. He shouted at him, saying that he had given him everything. Because of some woman, he was ready to turn away from his own father. Avion looked lifelessly somewhere, not reacting to his father's words. The boy turned to the window, opened it, and tried to jump out. But his father ordered the guards to stop him. He told his son to take out his anger on him, to hit his elderly father. Avalon began to cry. He screamed that he was not his father. He was the Duke of Ribéry, and Avalon was a simple paladin. The father hit him with all his strength that he fell down and wanted to hit him further. But Avion stopped his fist and in despair shouted that she had done nothing wrong. They had accepted her as a saint and then cast her out as a witch. He asked if they were sane, but everything could have been fixed. They could have just listened to her. And the father replied that he had been inactive because of his behavior. He had turned away from Ribéry. He had turned away from him. He had no need to help the saint. Avalon shouted that he could at least not make a witch out of her. Leaving, he told his father to stay away from him. He was going to Maria. The father screamed that the saint had died. He couldn't do anything. She was already dead. He fell to his knees and didn't want to believe his father's words. The man told him that it was all his fault. If it hadn't been for his behavior, he wouldn't have been so harsh. If he hadn't turned away from Ribéry, he wouldn't have even thought of such a thing. Father said that Avalon had killed a saint. He clutched his chest, and father called for a doctor. Avalon thought his father was right. He should have been content to look at her from afar, but greed got the better of him. And in the end, he destroyed Maria. The father sat by his son's bed, saying that he had lied. He was to blame for the saint's death, not Avillon. He had killed her and driven her son away. He alone was to blame for all the sins. He begged his son to take a sip of water. The 15th day of the 1000th year of the Hellenaire Empire, the night Avillon died. The paladin's body was drenched in grief. The man who had completely refused food and drink could not be saved. Avillon walked up the stairs to the doors with bright light. Ahead, he saw a woman with golden hair. He ran towards her, thinking it was Mary. As he got closer, he realized it wasn't her. But she looked so much like her. It was Gaia. She extended her hand to him, and he pushed it away. She said that Mary was waiting for him at the gates of heaven. He wanted to see her. He missed Mary very much. Gaia said that after many years, the saint's soul would be sent back to the world of the living. When that time came, she would allow them to start over with a clean slate. She gives his soul peace, so he needs to forget all his sorrows and start all over again. And she called him with her. He was furious. How could he forget everything? He asked her. She wants him to feel regret for Maria's death again and again. Refusing, he turned around and walked away. She promised that she would grant her the life of an aristocrat and seal her abilities for a time. Avillon shouted that even if he fell into the abyss, taking the wrath of God upon himself, he would not allow her to live as a saint again. He will not enter the gates of heaven, even as a spirit, but he will protect her. A voice was heard saying that he would be too weak for a spirit. Avillon turned around and saw a creature in a cloak and with wings. It offered to help him. The creature thought that since it was a soul, it might be overcome with a sense of fear. But the way it confronted the sky god was curious. The creature rushed around Avillon, praising how strong his soul was. Having been reborn so many times, he really liked him. The creature offered to come with him. The door opened, a nightmare wafting from it. The creature warned that many people had died passing through this door. Even he did not want to experience such a thing. Gaia was indignant, stopping chaos. He asked not to interrupt and again offered Avillon to follow him. Only he would have to hold out for several centuries. In return, he would be given great power and would be reborn without losing his memories. Gaia tried to convince him, and a quarrel began between the goddess and Chaos. And Chaos asked what his answer was. After a moment's hesitation, he decided that he would make this choice himself. He walked through the door to the pleading cries of Gaia, centuries in flames. If he can endure this suffering, he will gain great power. There has never been a soul that has lasted more than 50 years. Chaos couldn't believe he had survived this. He had been reborn as he had wanted, but there was no smile on his face. Chaos asked what name he would bear. Cutting his hair with a dagger, he answered, Ravnar. He asked if he liked it. Ravnar did not answer, looking at him. The creature said that the wings were part of him, but they did not shine for him, since he had a human soul. Ravnar was interested in how strong he was. The devil said that there was someone stronger than him, but the second place was vacant. While Chaos was talking to him, the man asked where he could find Maria. He replied that she would be reborn for a long time. Before, anyone could come to this place, but now demons appear in the human world and many people die. That's why she blocked the way. Simply because she doesn't like it. But the demons are in their territory, and they are capable of running to the call of the Demon King. Ravnar's eyes lit up with interest. He thought that the Demon King would be stronger than him. And Chaos suggested killing the Demon King. If he so desires, the devil will kill the Demon King. If Ravnar calls him dad, he will kill them all as soon as he asks. Ravnar turned around and walked away. 10 years later. Watching Ravnar through a magic mirror, Chaos praised his merits. Only 10 years later, he overthrew him and became the Demon King. Standing by the body of the Demon King, Ravnar initiated his brother Akantham into his service. Akantham, kneeling, swore to serve the Demon King for the rest of his life. Chaos appeared. Mentes, the Demon King, grabbed his leg and complained that it was not permissible for someone with a human soul to poison the Demon King with impunity. Chaos finished off the Demon King and began to praise Ravnar. He was proud that he had gone all this way alone, and it only took 10 years. The man waved the devil away. He offered a reward. He tore off his wings and gave them to Ravnar. He thought they suited him very well. He offered to move them around to check if everything was okay. He spread his wings. They were beautiful. Chaos asked if he wanted to thank his daddy. The devil said that 110 years had passed. He could see Maria. Ravnar arrived at the White Castle. He touched the walls and regretted that she was no longer here. The bell rang, attracting attention, and Ravnar flew up to it. From above, he saw a huge statue of Mary. He wondered if she had been happy that day. He was afraid he wouldn't be able to remember her face. From now on, he would come here when he missed her. Thanks to the statue, he can see her face. He cried, wiping away his tears. Ravnar saw a sign on the ground. It was written, "Here lies my son and saint, Darth Ribery." Dart lived a life of regret after the death of his son, fell into despair, and lost all his authority. Grieving every day, he slowly withered away. But before his death, he gathered the most famous artisans from across the empire to create a statue of the saint and the paladin. Ravnar fell to his knees. He cried. He didn't want to forgive his father for what he did, even if it was in the past. He would hate him until the very end.